right, we're live. I think we're good. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I've never actually started in any of these live, so most likely everybody knows who this is more than they know who me. But you still want to say anything to say hi real quick?
What's up, everybody? Landon from Bodybuilding. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Real quick before we dive into it, I want to go on to why a big basement here for wanting to talk. Because I want to talk about community in general, but also a lot of how bulking season and all that. And the usefulness of Bearmode, as Alex Leonidas coined it, how those can all be of great benefit to the community. But there's lots of great guys in the community. So why Landon here? So I've noticed, observing before I started wanting to try to create and actually communicate and put myself out there, was that an odd trend where despite all the other great guys out there, for whatever reason, whenever there was some type of litmus test for the quality of the community that this in, somehow it was always Landon that was around it in some weird way. Whether it was him being new to the whole sphere and much bigger channels recognizing he had quality content and being willing to bring him on, even though his last year of physique improvement hadn't happened yet, to prove that he knew what he was talking about. They heard what he said and recognized it was good. And despite being a much smaller channel, I found him around 6K subs. He's at over 17, almost 18 now. But they recognized, and they had no ego about it. They said, this guy knows his stuff. We're going to bring him on. So that was an excellent reflection of the community. And even in the more recent times, like a YouTube Fitness OG, Alan Thrall, recognizes this guy knows his stuff, brings him on. And instances like that, I believe, say so much about the community. And it was finally, way back when he was at 6K subs, looking at his comment section, not only the amount of interaction that people had on there, but how positive it was, how much, and not like fanboy positive interaction, like just regular dudes. Some of them even, they might be barely in their 20s or their teens, or they might be in their 50s and 60s, just being like, hey, this is a great place. So that was like the moment that finally sold me on this community in general. And like a good majority of the time, I saw some great reflection of what we're kind of now going with the noble Natty community. Somehow basement was always there. So not that any of us are special at all, but I was like, hey, well, I'm going to bring someone on if we're going to be talking about community. To me, basement's the community guy. So
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, no, that means a lot. And I have to agree with a lot of what you said about the community. The comment section has been one of the most interesting things, because I think you look at most bigger channels, even smaller channels too, before they blow up. And it's always the channels that either there's two options. There's a channel that is maybe makes good content, but there's no parasocial relationship. There's no fanboying and whatnot. So they just don't get comments. Or there's the bigger channels that get a lot of comments and are all very fanboy-esque. So I don't know how I struck that happy medium. It wasn't something I decided basically to do, but I think it just comes down to, excuse me, what my natural personality is like anyways. I don't think I'm someone that would draw people to be fanboys of myself personally. I don't think the content is about myself enough as it is about the community. So I have to think that that's basically what reflects in the comment section, in seeing people just come to the videos to actually learn about lifting and interact with other people. And I think the community's been they've been the people that are obviously making the comments and taking that upon themselves. I'm not telling people to comment or really asking for opinions, even though I do imply that I like to hear other people's opinions. It's always like it's like a comment section that people look forward to, and there's always good conversations going on there. So it's super cool to be a part of. And the way I see it is the videos I almost don't want to see them as like my videos and my content. It's like, this is an idea. This is what I made, and I'm looking at this content with you guys too. So that's, I guess, to word it kind of weirdly, that's kind of the way that I see it in a way.
yeah, because even as I was driving home hectically trying to get back because extra large deliveries last night, I was even like thinking about like, how on earth am I going to open? I kind of realized that, I mean, everyone like has all these various strengths and things, like kind of like with pin is like some of their strongest points, but like one thing I could describe like you as is like almost like a mirror to the community. So the people that are good for the community, their reaction, like how they react with you and your channel, like highlights them. Whereas we're not no names, no drama, but if they do not react well when looking in that mirror, that's all we really need to say there. So I found that interesting. Before I let myself start going off and doing more, who knows what? Let me reference, which actually kind of did leave one of my first couple of my notes is lines are on proving value and clarity of vision, and opening up, talking about how others in the community recognize the value that you had. That is where an interesting thing to discuss, I believe, comes up, and actually how we are able to prove our value to the community, both in the words and our knowledge, but also in our actions. And like in the last year, definitely like your physique and your change has been able to demonstrate that, but also in the knowledge, especially emphasis on programming, which a lot of big channels that like to make it big, that seem a little empty and difficult for me to get into. They do a lot of flashy stuff. They try to make it heavily entertaining and all of this stuff, which ironically makes it not very entertaining for me. And you just don't have much. So they're high production value, a lot you're able to watch, but not a lot you can learn from them. And some of them might have a physique to show that they have something to prove, but even a lot of them may not teach you how to get that effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on about that. I think with the way my channel is, and I'm obviously not the first person to have a channel like similar to mine in concept, but I think with the video topics, I'm part of the community, and I'm not just somebody that came here to create content purely. So the way I see it is I'm somebody that is part of the community, and I'm not necessarily any smarter than the average lifter in this community. I don't see myself as particularly intelligent, but one thing that I do have an advantage with is how much I care about lifting and how passionate I am about it. So for me to be able to take advantage of that and almost use that as a means to discover new things and understand lifting concepts either before or have a better understanding sooner than other people would get there, I think that's the true value in it. Because if somebody, like, let's face it, we all want to be super jacked and we all want results,
Yeah.
and that's why we're here. But if somebody just isn't quite as passionate about the training, even if that person's smarter than I am, they might not make these discoveries. So for me to say, all right, well, this guy wants the results just as bad as I do, but he also has 3 kids, works 50 hours a week, and just doesn't have that much time or even just natural desire to learn and study the stuff like someone like myself does. I think that's where the channel starts to come in handy. And then another thing that I try and practice on the channel and just in day-to-day life is just seeking truth regardless of how I feel about it. And I think that's something that gets lost a lot in the fitness industry in particular, where people just, it's a copycat industry. So we go through phases and the pendulum swings back and forth, but you'll see one trendy thing catch on and now that's all the rage, and people are blinded of the truth through what they feel is best. So they see someone they look up to, like an influencer, train a certain style. And I was blinded by this too. This is the whole power building thing. That was a huge trend. I followed that to a T, and I was the definition of a typical power builder. So when I was able to separate myself from that and actually do what's right, regardless of how I felt about it, that led me to make new discoveries with my lifting, since I was thinking critically and had a much more open mind with much less ego. And at that point, not only did I learn more about lifting, but I developed myself as an individual more. And that led, if you want to push things a little bit further, into me being able to be a part of the community and have a voice here with the channel.
Yeah, that actually leads into something I noticed about a lot of the great guys in the space is a lot of us are faced with the choice of, do I want to continue making gains or do I want to stick with the dogma and this thing that I believe? And a lot of them, like you, Paris, Alex, like so many of them, they're like, no, I want to keep making gains. So if I have to change what I believe in what I've done before, I'm going to try new stuff. So a lot of you are able to speak from experience, and a lot of the time there may not be science that you're aware of or science that's even out yet or anything to back it up. But you're like, I know, I tried this. It worked. It changed things around. And so the ability to speak from experience, everyone with their own flavor, I think is another huge part of it that makes it feel real, and we're able to identify, yeah, no, this person's actually talking. And from the experience, not only of your own training, but in your case, you actually coach clients that allowed you to find ways to communicate a lot of stuff. Like one of them, you've done the analogy for why you like higher reps, and you use like the jar and the rocks example. That's a concept in my mind I've been trying to figure out for a while, how to explain that simply. And I kept overcomplicating. I heard your analogy and I was like, you just use an analogy from elsewhere, put it right in, and it fit. That's the type of thing that like demonstrates experience for not only knowing training principles, but communicating those training principles to people. So that shows that you've communicated those to people before.
I appreciate that. It's something that I've definitely struggled with. I was never that great of a speaker. Not that I'm a great speaker now, but of course, filming myself talking for 30 minutes on topics I like definitely develops that skill at least a little bit. But the way I see it, and this is what I try and explain to people, to my clients and people on the channel, is that a lot of the concepts that I talk about, people already know, they just don't understand it. So what I want to do with these videos is help people understand things that they already know. Because when you know something, if somebody tells you something that's correct, you can believe it. But if you don't truly understand it, you'll start to doubt it at some point. And anytime somebody tells you something else, you're just going to follow that new thing. So if you don't understand your own training method, or you don't understand a certain concept, you're not going to actually stick with it and see the value in it, because you have to truly understand the purpose of it. And I think that's where some people say, I might overthink or overcomplicate things. And I don't see it that way. The way I see it is, you have to have such a good understanding of the fundamentals and of the basics to actually understand your own training philosophy and have some sense of direction. Because if you're just relying on the community to tell you what to do, you're basically just a consumer of the industry, and it will tell you exactly how to train. So right now, if you're a new lifter and you don't want to care to understand things on a deeper level, you'll be a biomechanics guru. And 5 years ago, you were a power builder, and who knows what's next? Might go back to power building or something. But you're just you're a consumer, and you're floating around. Your training methods and your goals are chosen for you. And I don't like being that passive, especially in something that I'm passionate about. And of course, the other people have that same passion that I do in the community. So why not take the extra time and actually understand things on a deeper level, and not just know things, but truly understand things? And I know I've repeated myself there, but that's something that I think is pretty important.
That actually leads into something that one of the things that really helped me once I found this community, but also a few of you guys that are specifically into the bodybuilding. So like, for instance, UNNH, you're both 100% set on the bodybuilding, realizing like to each of you and now to me that you realize the strength numbers don't matter. And what you had said about getting caught up in trends, but you don't understand your training, that means not only the technical aspects you don't understand, but if you don't understand what you're training for, what you really want, that clarity of vision, that can also interfere with your ability to have fun training. Because I had done, for instance, a couple strongman competitions, and looking back, I can realize that in getting ready for them, I would always kind of be waiting for it to be done so I could get back to my real training as I saw it in the back of my mind, because less hypertrophy training, these specific movements didn't excite me, and I'm not a competitive guy. So I would still do it. I'd have fun, but in the back of my mind, I was always like, all right, as soon as this is done, I can get back to my real training. And once you guys started to point out that multiple of you had already gotten caught up in some type of strength thing or someone else's excitement or a trend or this or that, and you started really to hone in on, no, I just want to get jacked, just big. I don't care about the numbers, anything. That gave me clarity of vision. And then suddenly I was able to begin and enjoy my training a lot more. And others may not necessarily be into the bodybuilding, but if it's something else, that clarity of vision is incredible. Like I've been watching Sam Schuther's row the 600-pound bench. I'm not a power lifter. I don't care about my numbers, but watching someone that has clarity of vision, that excitement, I mean, that's exciting to see, gotta say.
Yeah, and he'll have no regrets too. He's chasing what he wants to. It's someone else didn't tell him to bench 600 pounds. That's genuinely what he wants to do. So that's the secret. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It just matters how you feel about it.
And one of the most fun parts is seeing how he's like, what I'm doing is stupid, and like how he is dumping his whole life into doing this. But when you hear him talk, you don't hear an idiot talk. You see someone who is excited about their life talk. And like, to me, that's super big. Even though I do not care about that, I do care about lifting, and seeing someone that into it. I'm like, clarity of vision, man. That is like probably, he at the moment might be my favorite example for having your clarity of vision and how you train. Anyone else can get caught up in trends and is susceptible to different training methods and other people's excitement could nitpick what he's doing. But he found what he wants. So that's huge. So I got to say, he's like a great example of clarity right there, I believe.
Easily. Yeah, he's a smart guy too, and he's chasing the goals that he wants and learning what he needs to. And he's probably going to learn more than a lot of other people would because he actually enjoys it and cares about it. And that will stick too. And I think that's huge because it's not like he's going to wake up one day when he's 30 and be like, oh, I didn't want to do this. And of course, your goals can change over time, but you can tell that's genuinely what he started lifting for and something that actually is what he desires. And that's huge.
Yeah, and it goes also back to experience. Like, he's committed to the 600-pound bench. So if he suddenly finds out at 590 that something that he thought was the way to do things is wrong, do you think he's going to stick to that thing that he found out is wrong because he wants to stick to his old ways? Or do you think he's going to be like, screw it, I'm dumping that thing if it's not going to let me do it? He's willing. He had that clear vision, allows him to go after it. He's willing to experiment. He's willing to try new things because he has his goal. Forget any dogma you might have. You know what you want. Whereas if you don't have that, you can let yourself get caught up. And shoot, who was it? Can't remember who I'm listening to, but someone had told it was a Faz video recently talking about how he's like 20 years later, and the same little group of guys that were all about the HIIT training from way back when, they're still saying, oh yeah, 300-pound bench is like a peak, and even though most of the group can't do it, just because they never changed and they eventually stopped believing in their goal that they stated they believe and just kept up with the dogma in their little like group and didn't go anywhere. So
yeah, well, that's when someone gets overly attached to the method, you lose sight of your own goal. So I think that's another good mindset to have. Like you said, clarity of vision, make sure the goal is always what's the priority. And and this is where it gets into the debate of whether you need to enjoy your training or not. If your goal is your top priority, then your enjoyment comes from chipping away towards that goal, regardless of the method, practically speaking. And I think that's a concept that I think a lot of people have lost because they're so caught up in the day-to-day that they forget to zoom out and look at the bigger picture because muscle building is a slow process. So that's one thing where I most people do honestly disagree with me on that. That's one video where everyone's like, I disagree with you on this, but I tried to get my point across the best I could. But the way I see it is,
I can see that because I also see the difference between having fun and enjoying the process. For instance, I don't think anyone has fun at their work, but you can pick a job where you can enjoy it, so to say. Like, for instance, there's lots of aspects about training that aren't fun, but I enjoy the process because I understand the goal that I'm going towards, full clarity of vision. So I can still able to enjoy the process. I don't have fun with every exercise. Like, for instance, I'm high frequency ab training. Every time I get to that part in the giant set, I'm like, oh, dang it, abs, freaking. I just want to rest and then do the next push and pull. I don't want to do abs again. So in that moment, I'm not having fun, but as a whole, I'm enjoying the process. And when I'm done with that whole giant set and I look back that I still did it, I can like retroactively enjoy that. So, I mean, in that way, I guess I'm going to say I agree. You don't have to have fun at every moment to enjoy the process. And if you're not enjoying the process, you probably need to pause and reflect on your goal, or at least or your method, something along the way, because holistically you should be able to enjoy the process if you truly understand what you want.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of people are almost afraid to measure their results and train for results. And they just and this isn't a terrible mindset, but a lot of people will take the mindset of, all right, if I lift and have fun lifting and train what I enjoy for 20 years, I'll be pretty jacked and I'm okay with that. And I think at that point, if you take that mindset, then of course you do have to try and enjoy and have fun in your training. But I think if you truly do prioritize results first over anything else, and you're okay to be a little bit more surgical, which in my opinion is the avenue most people should explore first. With something like that, I do think it's important to make sure you prioritize, I guess, satisfaction would be the better word, of chipping away towards your goal rather
Yeah.
than actually having fun and enjoying what you're doing, regardless of the goal. And that is ultimately the way you kind of have to see bodybuilding, because it's not like, oh, I hit a 600-pound bench or I hit a 500-pound squat or whatever it is. It's just a slow, kind of forever process of building muscle.
Yeah, I think the word satisfaction is a good one, because even in some moments you're not even particularly enjoying it, but you look back and you're eventually satisfied. Like I have a big appetite. Did not enjoy my recent cut to get down so I can do a proper slow bulk, but looking back, I'm satisfied that I did it.
Yeah.
And before we get into talking a little bit about Bearmode and like the slow bulk and all that stuff, which has amazing benefits for progress, gains, and even pushing away like PED temptation and all that. So I do want to get to that, because we both have similar visions and just wanting to pursue just bodybuilding and not worry about numbers. Want to rapid fire a few questions for us that I think we've probably both had, so we don't have to go in depth. These can be like bullet point answers if we want. But the first one I have is, why no competing? Why don't you compete?
Well, it's just not what I want to do. My goal is always to build muscle, and bodybuilding isn't about building muscle. It's about how lean can you get, plus how much muscle can you have. So the way I see it is I take satisfaction in chipping away at building muscle, and doing a bodybuilding contest is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months off of that process entirely. So I'm actually about to potentially start working on something behind the scenes with a couple other channels about some form of bodybuilding competition that doesn't place a huge emphasis on leanness, but more on your overall physique,
Awesome.
muscle mass, health, and a few more things. I'll be able to speak a little bit more on that down the road, but I won't yet. And that is something I would do, because that is something that in my current process, I could compete. And that would actually enhance my training, because naturally I am a very competitive person, and I haven't had that competitive edge to me for a few years. I've mellowed out for a bit, because now I'm pursuing something that is individual. I'm not competing against other people. But when I personally compete against other people, I'm gonna win. Like that's my mindset. I am not a loser with that. I will basically do whatever I can, and I have a pretty ruthless mindset with that, which the channel hasn't seen yet. So I'd be very curious to kind of embrace that mindset on the channel and see what I can come up with.
That
But
would
for
be
now,
exciting to
I have
see.
been mellow.
Yeah, because it's like, as much as like for instance, NH normally has like the more like tone that he has for most of his videos, which I find appropriate for most of his videos. When we see a little bit of the savage side come out, I'm like, ooh, that's good. Like I can understand how too much of that probably wouldn't be the right mix. It'll be too spicy. But seeing some of that come out in certain series, that's pretty good. But my answer to this is pretty short too. I'm not a competitive guy, but also the current standard for bodybuilders of having to be that shredded, I don't like that look on anyone. And especially when everyone is all shredded, all on the big stage, all the big lights, so out of a context you would normally see a person in, and with like the fake tan and all that, it's very difficult for me to put into perspective how impressive it is when they're at like a normal but lean body fat percentage day to day in normal clothes, or maybe like in just jeans and like showing off or something like that, and something that I can understand as real life. That's when I can get impressive. That's part of like, that's why I wouldn't want to compete. So our next rapid fire one is, why natural?
Um, I'll try and keep this one a little bit shorter, but
Yeah.
I was actually suffering with hypochondria before I started lifting. So I basically, for an entire summer, basically a handful of months, I couldn't even sleep at night because I was so worried about my health. It's an unrealistic, just crazy anxiety about your health. And lifting happened to be the one thing that I was so obsessed with. It completely distracted me from that anxiety, and I was able to get back on track. So I'm a health conscious person. Plus, I have that deep down anxiety about my health that will never go away. So I've never even considered PEDs. If I didn't have that, I don't think I would take them, but I do think I would have maybe actually like thought about it a bit more than I have. And that's why I don't really talk about being natural or promote being natural, because for me, it's never really been a choice. It's kind of been something that I've just done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, mine is. I am a bit of a weird one because I am now on like actual legitimate real TRT. But before that, like growing up, even before I started lifting and stuff, and what got me into lifting was I was always a bit of a health freak. Like there were some days where my brother growing up, we shared a room, and I wanted to try to have fresh air when I slept. So no matter how hot or cold it was at night, the window was open or at least cracked. Like I was, my protein shakes when I was young was milk, honey, and raw eggs that I would just blend up. Trying to do lifting, I was trying to study all stuff about health. I was always freak about that. And then, of course, I was always the guy also doing lifting. And I would always self-reflect on why it took me so much longer to make progress than everybody else. And then you keep blowing past me. And I was like, just keep going, keep improving, try to get healthier. I mean, my progress was so slow. It took like 6-7 years to hit a 315 deadlift. And then after about a decade of training, found out that I had probably worse testosterone than most of our grandfathers. So I had a bit of a period where I felt cheated by the world. But once I was able to get up to normal levels and found out how powerful normal average is, I was like, and then seeing the examples in the community of how far average can go, and they're still not done. They're still growing. I'm like, why? I'm having the fastest results I've ever had because I'm average finally. And guys who are normal can achieve so much. Why enhance? So that's trying to keep my answer to
The
that
potential's high.
so high. They haven't even reached. And because I'm in this for life, I'm also big on health. Why? If I'm already forced to take medication because I so don't want to be on it, I keep forgetting to take it. Why would I then have to commit to even more that is going to have long-term health consequences? And of course, now I have a family. Don't want the legal repercussions of that because so the last one. Asking this one, because I know it's one we both have or will get. Asking this one almost makes me physically ill, and I know you just got off being sick, so I'm sorry. But
Take it
why
easy.
something so vain/non-functional?
What was the question?
Why do something bodybuilding that's so
Why do something?
vain/non-functional? It's the
Well,
non-functional part that I'm like, but it's a question that gets asked.
yeah, well, I hate doing things with my body, and I'm very narcissistic, so it makes perfect sense. In reality, the way I see it is aesthetics are something you can enjoy 24/7. That's not to say you can't enjoy that with another pursuit, but for example, I used to be a hockey player, and I would always have fun on the ice, but as soon as you get off the ice, it stops. You're still a hockey player, but you can't see that. You can't do that. When you're a bodybuilder, your muscles don't leave you. So it's a way to have that, like, and this is probably some ADHD deep down speaking, where I have to have that like almost stimulation in a way, but to be able to have my physique literally with me because it's my own body with me 24/7, it almost lets you enjoy what your passion is 24/7. And then as far as why I actually started bodybuilding, I talked on this briefly with Freaky D. He had me on a 10-minute convo that he purposely
His
goes over 10 minutes
10-minute
with. Yeah,
tidbits.
yeah, 10 minutes, quote unquote. Yeah, it's hard to talk to him for only 10 minutes. He's a fun guy to chat with. So on that,
Yeah.
basically, I don't know what it was, but I was basically born wanting to be jacked. Um, Ever since I was a tiny little kid, I've always thought being muscular was like the coolest thing ever. So I had a trip with my brother. I think I was 6 or 7. I don't think I was in first grade yet. I'm pretty sure I was in kindergarten. And we went to Olympia Sports, and I immediately went to the dumbbell rack and just picked up the heaviest weights that I could curl. And I still have those 8-pound dumbbells to this day from when I was like 5 or 6. So I've always just had a fascination with lifting and being jacked. I've always thought it was the coolest thing. And that's pretty much the entire reason why I do it. I just think it's really cool, and it's not any deeper than that. It's just fun, cool, exciting, and I love it.
Cool. So those are like some of the concepts today. Now I finally want to get into what's after talking for so long. the stuff that I know both of us right now we find big. Alex coined it recently, but it's not new. As I said once before, none of us here are special. Even he's not special. He's just having us look back to what people who were jacked over 100 years ago already knew. He's just bringing it back. He's putting his own flavor on it, which I think is a good thing for us to be able to do. Keep rebranding the same old thing to keep it fresh, to keep our eyes on what we need. And that's something such as Bearmode and his naturally enhanced philosophy, which is, for one, emphasizing the muscles that make you look big, i.e., understanding what you want, back to clarity of vision, but also the higher body fat percentage, higher than the modern fitness industry pushes on us, to allow you to both look better under normal conditions, look big, what we want under normal conditions, but also means you're eating enough food to make progress. Those are like the kind of crux of how useful is that to the community.
Yeah, well, I think bear mode is just I think it's the way to go for a lot of people. And I'm not saying you have to get above 20% body fat, but I think at least getting to be to a point where you are maybe 15 to 20%, probably closer to 20%. One, you feel better in most cases. It's a little bit different for everybody, of course. I'm not trying to put a hard number on that, but I think the biggest thing here is you just fill out your clothes that much better, and you pretty much always have clothes on. And with that, you're just going to feel better in your physique. If you're somebody that is in bodybuilding because you do like to build muscle, you are probably being brainwashed into being leaner than you truly want to be. I guess in other terms, that could be body dysmorphia, as some people would call it. But I would also say part of it's probably peer pressure, just being in the industry and seeing what other people are doing as far as getting lean. Uh, and I think that's something you have to be mindful of. You could almost draw a parallel conclusion between something like that and falling for like the power building trend or the biomechanics trend. Other people are doing it. Just because they're doing it doesn't mean it's the best thing to do. And it certainly doesn't mean that you have to do it. I think you have to be very confident that what you're doing is actually something you want. There's nothing wrong with being lean. It's totally up to you. If it's something that you genuinely desire and you genuinely do want to be lean and you had that decision made up before you were influenced by other people, I'm all right with that. And you should be too. But if you're someone that wanted to get jacked, take someone like myself, for example, where I just wanted to get as big as I possibly could. When I started to see that trend of people wanting to be leaner, I just followed that trend. And then I stopped building muscle, or my muscle growth was at a much slower rate. And I wasn't doing what I actually wanted to. So I was just kind of emotionless and numb towards my training. I had the discipline to do it because it's something that I had already had a habit in place for. But it didn't actually fulfill me and make me feel the way I wanted to. And that's when I realized it was a mistake. And I hate to see other people do that too.
Yeah. Speaking of like how much we see that now, even though in the day-to-day life, in the real world, like bear mode is lean, bear mode is skinny. But if you're stuck in the microcosm of like the fitness industry and TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and all that, and you're just seeing lots of these shredded people, and you get caught up in that and think you have to be shredded too, well, you start getting lots of problems, like outside of the whole, you're not eating very much, you don't like it, but also you're slowing down your gains, and most of us were likely in this to get gains, and now you can't get gains, and so you have no gains to show off being shredded. But then if you start finding out the people who are able to be shredded all the time are making gains because they hopped on stuff, now you begin to think that, I've reached my natty limit and I can't put on any more muscle. And the only way to get bigger or stronger is to start taking stuff. But if you had just ate enough food, every people in every day-to-day life, your family, your friends, work, job, all that, would still would call you shredded, but also you'd be eating enough food to make gains. And plus, when you see yourself in the mirror or in a picture, you're filling out your clothes. So you're like, oh, yeah, this is all working out. So that's another benefit I see for actually eating enough food.
Yeah, I agree. I think the physiques look better too when you're natural. Not all the time, but you have to be pretty advanced to be able to actually look good when you're that lean. You even hear some of the biggest guys, like I know Alex Leonidas and then GVS, both had a video where even those guys that are very jacked, when they were lean, uh, they both were talking about how they felt tiny in clothes. And that wasn't just a feeling that they had. If you put them in a regular sized shirt and you're that lean, you just don't look that big, even though you have so much muscle mass. So your muscles are overly depleted. You need a little bit more body fat. Uh, and that way you can maximize the muscle that you already have, because if you're going to store some fat in your muscle anyways, take advantage of that, because it's not like you're just putting fat on your arms to be fat. If you have muscle there, you can hold a little bit more fat and have it still look good. So I'd say if you put all the time and effort in to build that muscle in the first place, I would say just accept a regular body fat percentage, push bear mode a little bit, and you'll look much better than you would as a person that has no muscle and was that same body fat percentage.
You did cut out for a second. I heard you say push in like 5 seconds of nothing. So what was that?
Oh, I was basically just saying that if you're somebody that's already built a good base of muscle, try to get into that bear mode range, get to a regular body fat percentage, because if you already have that base of muscle built, you can hold a regular amount of body fat and still look great. Versus someone that maybe doesn't have any muscle mass or very little muscle mass, they'll just look fat when they get to maybe a bear mode percentage. But for somebody that has a decent base of muscle, you can actually maximize that and take advantage of it. And your body fat will make your muscles look even bigger, which is
Yeah,
kind of
because not
cool.
only is if you get too shredded, all the fat making your neck and traps look bigger is gone, so you don't look as jacked when you have a shirt on. But on the flip side, I even made a video like discussing this a little bit about how most people are used to seeing a range of people from skinny to fat. If you throw in a whole bunch of muscle, it throws off their ability to understand what you are. Even if you have a little bit of a belly protruding from your shirt, but you have mountains here or something, and like this is a tree trunk, they can't see the belly. So you could be at what would on anybody else without meat would be fat, but they see lean and jacked.
Spot on. Yeah,
So
muscle gives you room for error, because objectively speaking, if someone is, take like a jacked power lifter that's 30%, for example, someone like your day-to-day person thinks that person is jacked and lean. You wouldn't even notice that they have a little bit of a gut. So I'm not saying to get to that level, because you have to take some health into account. But yeah, I mean, realistically, you can get away with a bit of a higher body fat percentage and still be healthy too, in that bear mode range, of course.
yeah, since I see bear mode as not having a belly, but having a flat-ish or close to flat stomach, that's still a range where if you actually directly train the abs and hypertrophy the muscles, get them bigger like every other skeletal muscle can do, then it's better able to push through that fat, which then you could, if you have even the slightest outline of abs, people automatically perceive that as even leaner. So if you manage to have your actual abdominals hypertrophied enough to where you get a slight outline at 20, 21, 22%, not only do you have all that fat beefing up your traps and your neck, making you look bigger and close, but if you have a shirt off and you see that slight outline, they see, their mind, they see abs. Like, if no matter how much fat you have, if like a normie sees abs, they think, oh, he's at 10%, he's shredded, which is weird if you're in the industry and you actually understand it. But remember, real world, this is what people see.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's important to kind of keep that like quote unquote normie mindset in check too, because that's where we all started, where you would see someone that's been lifting for a year, they've made a little bit of newbie gains, and in our minds, that person looks great. And then when you kind of get to that year of lifting, you're not satisfied. You want a little bit more. And that's just it's the slow adaptation. It's like anytime you get something, you get used to it. That's just human psychology. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think to be able to appreciate your physique and appreciate your body fat percentage, you have to be able to tap into that mindset that you held before lifting. So for me to be able to say, all right, well, I would have killed for 16-inch arms, and now I'm like, oh, 17-inch arms. I want 18. Uh, I'm able to tap back into that mindset and really genuinely appreciate the progress that I've made. And I think where people say like, oh, you must have body dysmorphia to be able to push yourself hard in the gym and to desire such a great physique, they're like, oh no, you're just lying about it. I'm like, no, I'm genuinely satisfied and happy. And one of the biggest struggles that I face personally is complacency, because I understand how far I've come as a lifter since before I started lifting, and I genuinely do think I look great. So for me to be able to really and truly be satisfied and have that goal I always had of being jacked, that's a little bit tougher to push the extremes and maybe get to something like an 18-inch arm someday. So yeah, I mean, it's a legit thing that you have to keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah, that reminds me of a couple of stories I have. One I want to save for a little bit later when maybe we can touch on a little bit more mental health stuff. But the first one is like a story I had that like locked me back into not only like Norman perspective, but the perspective of being like a high schooler and being like a young guy, that brought me back to how much I've actually achieved. I don't know if you have any stories from dealing with people about now that you've gotten jacked and you've gotten big, but the story that amused me at a stop I regularly deliver to, they've been seeing me for months. This one guy that I ended up finding out was about to graduate high school and was about to go into trade work to become a welder. So he was like a skinny high schooler kind of looking guy. But after seeing me deliver there for months regularly, he came up to me one day and started asking me a little bit about training and like how long I've been training and all this, and like asking how much I weighed. And it was when I was at peak bulk. So once again, I had a little bit of that belly pushing against the shirt. But when I told him I weighed 220, he was just like, oh, "You look huge." He did not see the belly. He's a guy that wanted to get big. He was starting to lift. He was even talking about how some of his friends were already giving into PED temptation, but he wanted to stay natural. And he didn't see all the fat. He saw big. And that was one of the moments that like kind of brought me back to reality of how far I've gotten, but also how like they don't see this, they see this, they see this, they see this. So that was a very useful experience to me to really kind of snap me back to reality. So I don't know, have you had any experiences like that?
Yeah, well, no, it was a reality check for you, because I think sometimes when you're so caught up in these little goals of you trying to go from a 17-inch to a 17.5-inch arm, you forget just how far along in the journey you are. And being able to just kind of tap back to maybe your former self is that high school kid you're delivering to, and it just kind of puts you back into that mindset. I don't think I've personally had any one instance. I do get I do get some compliments like at the commercial gym and whatnot usually, um, where people probably act like I'm bigger than I perceive myself, because I'm just so used to the way I look. Building muscle is a slow process, and I've looked muscular for years at this point. But I would say just the amount of support and the amount of good feedback that I get for how far I've come from the channel. It's just, there wasn't necessarily this one thing in particular, but I think uh, seeing all those little comments kind of add up just makes me kind of, it gives me a bit of a reality check where, yeah, I'm doing pretty good, and I'm happy about that for sure. And also being able to compare myself to some of the other top naturals. And obviously I'm not the biggest by any means, but to be able to see where I stand compared to them, it's pretty cool.
Which actually does bring it back a little bit. It's so cool seeing like from a year ago or so to now, like how much, like how you've closed the distance, which is kind of going back to what I said, how they recognized your talk and you continue the talk, but now like the walk's catching up. Like I also do find that pretty cool, how you're actually demonstrating it too. So make sure before I get,
Appreciate it, man.
so I think we got a little bit of room to dive more into a little bit of mental health stuff. We already mentioned a little bit how, because you're actually capable of making progress without having to do lots of dieting, which might give you issues like food problems from restrictions or PED temptation to keep making progress. Something that I also like had experiences with. Let me set the stage. I've heard some people, for instance, who are very obese, might have some body image issues, have to do things as extreme as remove the scale from their house or remove the mirrors from their bathroom, because every time they walk by and they see them and stuff, like what they see in their eyes, like it like, and these are words from people that I've heard say these stories. So this isn't me judging anyone, but like what they see, their descriptions, is something that disgusts them and all this. And they might already be in a bad place, might already be depressed. And when they see that, it brings them lower. Something I've noticed on the flip side is after working for years and years, I reached a point to where if I'm in like a place where like the weeks have been rough and I just woke up like at 8 p.m. because that's how my life works to go to work, and I'm tired and all this and I don't want to do it, and I walk past the mirror, instead of seeing this like tired, overwhelmed, scared little boy that I might somewhat feel like, instead I glance by the mirror, and under the corner of my eye, instead I see like Superman or something. And then like that has an effect where this is how my subjective reality feels. But when I look in the mirror, this is what objective reality is telling me I am. So like the inverse of some stories I've heard with body image issues, like once you've put in the work and built something, every time you look at yourself, you see a history of your consistent choices. And when those consistent choices have been good, it's able to like to reaffirm you in a way that I don't know if I can really properly describe.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I think what you're describing is kind of the opposite of that first example you gave of somebody that was disgusted with how they look, trying to avoid looking at themselves as much as they can because it reinforces reality on them. But I don't think people make the point that you made about when you make progress and you enjoy that progress and you can visually see it in reality in a mirror in your example, that solves your problem, because when you need a reality check, you just look at yourself and you feel better about yourself. And the more times you see how good you look and that you have the reinforcement that you've been making the right choices and training hard and getting your nutrition down and everything, that's going to have a reinforcing effect on your mindset. And as much as some people might struggle with mental health issues, or they might have a twisted version of reality, I think it's good to have those reality checks too, even if you can't fully grasp what reality is, because I think deep down you'll always know what the truth is. And I think if you're somebody that can get yourself to a point where, like you said, when you're going into work and you feel like a scared little boy and you see yourself and you're like, oh, that is not what I look like, then it can have a similar concept. And I've kind of felt like that same thing too, where I'm a younger guy. So in my mind, I still feel like I look like I'm in high school or something. And then I'll look in the mirror and I'm like, that's a little bit of facial hair. Not much by any means, but it's there. It's there. I got a little bit of muscle now. So I'm like, huh, I look way older than I feel like. And the more times I film a video or look at myself in the mirror or check my former videos of myself lifting, the more I'm like, oh, okay, I'm actually getting bigger, making progress and growing up. And now it makes me feel a little bit more confident, right?
Once again, allowing what others see out of you, and especially when you're able to not only have that reflection, but also further think about you've accomplished that despite life getting bigger and more complicated. Like when I started training, I was a young teenager, no job, no family, obviously, also homeschooled. So I didn't even have to wake up early to go to school. It was in my house. So I started, and now I'm married, have a kid, work nights and trucking. So some long hours and crazy days. And like all of this life stuff is piled on. And at any number of points, any other number of people have found an excuse in there to not do it. And yet I still found a way to keep it in. So when I see that, not only am I seeing my consistent decisions to make all those things to get me big, but I'm also seeing sticking to making those decisions despite life getting more complicated when everybody else would have quit. So in a way, because I see bodybuilding when approached like the long-term, like holistic, natural type of way as not just about the body, but also a lot about your mind, and even like your spirit and your internal growth and your characteristics. So when I'm able to see that, what I also see is like internally I had to grow and keep holding myself to a higher standard to just decide I'm not going to compromise. I'm going to keep taking care of a family, going to grow a family, but I'm going to also keep like physically, literally growing me. And those types of external pressures grow you. So when I look in the mirror and I see that, it's also able to say, hey, this is, and what I see is an external reflection of what inside of me has grown. So I know, so like you typically keep it more like on the outer level, more of the talking, but I've heard you give hints before about how like that type of external pressure grows you internally too.
Yeah, well, I think I think that's what happens when you take just to focus on training without even looking at the life outside training. I think in your own training environment, you can make that happen just by being a little bit more analytical, borderline surgical with your training, to the point where if you're actually going to start taking progress pictures and measurements, and you know those are due once a month, and you know you have 4 weeks to try and improve those numbers and improve those pictures a little bit, that is going to make you train a bit harder and actually pay more attention to your training, and that's going to hold you accountable. So if you're going to be someone that does that, and you keep an eye on your training log, and you record your training, and you film your sets, and all this kind of stuff, that's going to grow you as a person, like literally, but also make you just that much more aware. And it's going to get rid of any excuse you have. And I think if you were to take a lot of those people, like say, to go back to that power builder example, if you were going to hold them accountable to growing their arms, also with their squat, bench, and deadlift 1 rep max, rather than just with the 1 rep maxes, I guarantee you their entire philosophy on arm growth would completely change, rather than being this little minimalistic, oh, I'll just do this and I'll be fine. If you say, all right, yeah, you can test your 1 rep maxes and you'll check those once a month and go, yeah, that's fine. So be it. But you also have to measure your arms every month and make sure they're growing too. That will turn a switch in your mind to be more aware of the arm training. It will turn a switch in your mind to actually be less dogmatic about your own methods and more inclined to actually seek the best thing you can do to get the best results possible to increase those measurements. So when you take an approach like that, that changes the game quite a bit.
Yeah, when you don't view it as an accessory, like I know you for a while said you don't even like the term accessories at all, which makes a lot of sense, especially with your pure bodybuilding. What could you even qualify as an accessory? Like, there is nothing.
Wrist wraps, elbow sleeves.
It's a good way to put it. Your bling is about all you got. So before we like get too far out, did remember I wanted to get a little bit back to the functional bit. One of the philosophies I've really nailed down recently is I believe that training is innately functional. Like using your body is by definition. If we're going with the undefined sort of nebulous term that it seems people mean when they say functional, by that nebulous definition, like using your body in training, I do believe is functional as long as it gets you training, whether it's wanting to run a marathon, swim, powerlift, bodybuild, calisthenics, just already using your body as opposed to being sedentary is going to be functional. So that means that bodybuilding just purely for aesthetics, just for hypertrophy, and not attempting to be functional, you're already started off on the right foot. But I was thinking more about it today because I have to move lots of boxes and stuff. And there's lots of ways I'm very comfortable doing it because I try to train every single muscle and all these patterns. And both Paris and GVS have recently made videos talking about side bends of all things. And I remember watching those videos. I was like, if I train that for the aesthetic purpose of building up the obliques, they also mentioned how that can help like strengthen like the QL and all of this stuff. So it got me thinking, if I did that for the purpose of aesthetics, the accidental functional benefit would be all the bending over I do at work to move stuff. It would further get me safer there. And all the other movements I do, and because you're trying to hit every muscle, all these different movements, made me realize if you pursue lifting and bodybuilding, accidental functional benefits you're getting are, as a beginner, you're first learning how to safely lift and use your structure, so your bones and joints and all of that, to be solid and be safe and move functionally. And if you pursue powerlifting, you are choosing to maximize uses of the structure to move as much weight as possible. But if you transition more to bodybuilding focus, you are then using how to take that pressure and weight off of the structure onto the muscles, which can give for longevity, not beating up the structure as much. And you're learning to move in a variety of fashions, which you're going to move more difficult in the gym than what you're going to encounter in real life. And maybe just like it's like a more technical way to describe how you can accidentally get a multitude of functionality of training without trying to be functional in the slightest. So that was like a recent, just literally today, I was thinking about that. And other videos talking about the side bends, and I realized it's crazy how just, as I said, when I asked that non-functional question earlier, I said it made me sick asking it because it's so ridiculous. But yeah, those were just like some recent thoughts I had on that right there.
Yeah, well, I think with functional training, you get a lot of people that are confused about adaptations, like physical adaptations within your body compared to a skill adaptation. So basically what I mean by that is some form of growth process rather than an actual skill. So if you take something like, say, a hack squat, people say that's not functional because you don't have to stabilize it. But people don't understand that, yeah, a hack squat you don't have to stabilize. You're correct in that. But you're still getting incredible adaptations of the muscles and the joints that are involved. And once you have those adaptations, aka the growth in those specific muscles, they will be strong in things outside of the hack squat. And that's where you get into the carryover concept. Like that's what people miss the mark on. They think you have to be doing a very specific skill and specific movement pattern to be able to actually translate that to anything outside of that specific movement. But they don't realize that bodybuilding is building your base, which is making you more functional anyways. You can't tell me somebody that hack squats and gets massive quads isn't going to be able to do functional things with their legs just because they only know how to do it in one particular pattern, which is a 45-degree angle press with their legs. It doesn't make any sense when you truly think about it. So that's where people get it wrong in my experience.
Plus, it's not very difficult to, once you've developed all that, to then integrate it into further patterns that you might need. That's why bits of bodybuilding seem to slip in to almost everything, because a lot of places you need to build meat for one reason or another, whether it's to go up weight classes in MMA or to reach your 1 rep max eventually in powerlifting or something. Those fundamentals of hypertrophy slip in everywhere. And once they've got the new muscle, they then get more specific to what the function they need, and they start training that. And it actually came me up with the analogy, according to Disney, I don't know if this is canon for Star Wars anymore. I don't keep track or care. But at least in the old canon, where they have the different lightsaber forms, how it worked, I don't know if you caught up with, or you were ever super into the extra expanded stuff with Star Wars, or if anyone else is. How it worked is like these 7 different lightsaber forms. The important part is supposedly they had everyone started obviously with form number 1, which is just very basic and designed to teach you how to use a lightsaber. And most people, after learning that one, how to use a lightsaber safely and not, cut themselves into pieces, would then transition into other forms. They have their own pros and cons, but they all had to start there. And there were some that chose to specialize predominantly in that one form, called like Shicho or something like that. Doesn't matter though. I almost see bodybuilding as that same way. It has like a fundamental basicness that can then be applied to all this other stuff as a foundation, or you can just stay there and keep doing that one thing. But because it's the basic thing you start with, it will always be able to be integrated into other things, unless it causes you to get too heavy for your very specific sport. Like if you want to run marathons, probably don't spend a lot of energy bodybuilding yet. Maybe when you're done with marathons. But so I don't know if
that was a great analogy. Made a lot of sense. And I think you summed it up perfectly there. Bodybuilding is building your base to be able to develop better skill moving forwards until a certain point when you get potentially too heavy. anything from there, like you said, pros and cons after that. Bodybuilding won't really have any cons unless you just do too much of it. Anything else from there, like, yeah, you can practice a fine skill, but you can't, that doesn't carry over to as many things as something like building up your actual body would.
Yeah, and especially if we're talking about for being natural, there aren't, unless you're talking about very specific sports, maybe a lot of ways where you can truly get too big. And even then, unless you're talking about a sport that needs you really light, it would be hard to get too big. Like one example I could think of, maybe if you're doing gymnastics, maybe, but most gymnasts peak very young, way younger than when they could have put on too much muscle anyway, I think. Like maybe figure
Yeah, and
skating.
then there's the leanness factor too. So that can make a huge difference where it's like some top natural bodybuilders that are as jacked as you can get naturally, they can fluctuate by like 50 pounds from being shredded to their peak bulk in the off season. So something like that, even, and that's not factoring in any changes in their muscle size. So you can be as jacked as you possibly can and still take away not 50 because you can't be stage clean 24/7, but
Yeah.
maybe 35 pounds and still be very functional at basically your natural limit.
Yeah, or even if you want to do something that does have a weight class, I mean, for instance, like powerlifting and strongman and other types of competitive sports, even combat sports, they all know what water cutting is. So, I mean, there's still lots of flexibility without having to think some. The only way to truly get muscle bound is to either build the muscle and never integrate it through using your body. Like if you just go to the gym, do all machines, no stabilization, then you go home and you stay on the couch and you never walk around, you never bend over and pick stuff up, you never interact with the real world. In that case, I could see being muscle bound and immobile and non-functional while being natty. Or the other way is to get so big beyond what physiologically you would normally be capable of anyway because you use gear, and then maybe you're going to eventually reach a point where, yeah, you do have too much meat. But those are not, I'd be willing to bet most people aren't in those boats. So you're not going to get too big.
Not something to worry about is the way I'd say it.
I know we're running up on an hour. One final thing. This is almost like hopefully like a future call out to more of the community. But one thing I've noticed about this little sphere we have is it's composed mostly of either white or white passing young dudes. So this is me kind of hoping over the next few years we're going to see some variety come in, and also partially a call out to one of my best buds, Lane. He's an Islander, so like the same geographical region as The Rock. Kind of want to see guys like him and like some ladies start to get into this sphere because I mean we look too similar. I think like there's plenty of us.
There's plenty of us.
Yeah.
We could use some more long hair though. That sounds like an easy task to start first. I think me and you have the hair down.
Yeah, we got like shaking it up in one way or the other, and otherwise we're just having to start doing our thing. Like you have to have like the flannel and all that. And for a while, GVS had the blue background, but I've stolen that, so dibs now.
You kind of stole it. You're aimed at the gray or tan behind.
Yeah,
you now.
this is also where I have my whiteboard now, so it's a whole ghetto setup. And I realized once I hung it up that it was not the best spot because when I put the light over there, it reflects right in the middle of the whiteboard. So I mean,
yeah, it's a nightmare. I'm in the same boat as you. Anytime I try and film with a whiteboard, it's like, well, I can't set the whiteboard at the height that I need. And then when the camera's faced at it, there's a glare on the exact stuff I need to show. So I mostly ditched that idea. So props to you for sticking with it. The only solution I can come up with is an old school chalkboard. I don't think those glare very much.
Yeah, well, fortunately, the type of video I both enjoy watching and creating doesn't rely on one. So, but also I can very much do lots of long form content if the internet allows me. So, I mean, I could accidentally become an NH that actually edits his videos is what it is. Like it's like he had like a almost a religious thing against editing, but apparently it's not. It's not that bad. Occasionally you'll notice he edits something now. So
Editing is it's a time suck, that's for sure. And it's one of those things where it's like the more you edit, the better your production quality can be, but how sustainable is it really? And how much does it benefit your channel specifically? So for somebody like me, where the style I film, it's like, yeah, I could edit it like Jeff Nippard, but the personality that I have, I'm not gonna get 4 million subscribers.
yeah, there would be too much of a disconnect eventually. Yeah. Part of what made me decide, outside of just seeing the community, and actually it was watching that, and like seeing like the comments and like how like friendly the community was, like actually got kind of choked up. Not only that, but when I was young, I had liked editing and making videos, so I wanted to get back to that. So I was like, I'm feeling drawn towards this community. Plus, I want to edit videos. So part of it for me is it gives me content to edit to begin practicing a craft I would like to. My dream would be to make this my actual job one day in some form or fashion. So at least for me, it's relevant, even if it's a time sink, to actually do the editing. But I think that's where even I pick bodybuilding inadvertently because it's the most artistic way of lifting possible. Which is why I'm not competitive, and I don't care about numbers anymore. It's just the most artistic way of doing it. Plus, I like the art of editing and doing the videos and all of that too. So, like for me, that's what it ends up being, a way to practice art, really.
Yeah, well, editing is cool. I love it. It's time consuming, so you really do have to love basically editing or get a pretty good benefit from it in some other way, shape, or form. So if it's something that you enjoy and could benefit from with your channel, why not? I say go for it.
Yeah, pretty much. So I think I managed to keep mostly on track with my notes. I think they did pretty good. Do you have anything else that you feel is relevant on the discussion, or that something you wish you've been asked but no one ever really asked and you want to kind of close out on?
No, I think you pretty much covered everything that we had talked about before. I know we covered the Bearmode and everything, some mindset stuff too, which I always enjoy to talk about. So yeah, no, it was good. And I think we both got to ramble on a little bit, as each of us like to do a little bit, especially myself in particular. So you gave me the time I needed to ramble, and that's all I can say. I can appreciate
that's why I asked before we started recording if you had any time restraints that you wanted to be concerned about, because I could very, very easily go on much longer. So I think that'll be it before we're already starting to do the whole ramble on thing again. So, all right.
Well, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks for being my kind of first little guinea pig. Hopefully, I'll be having more out, start talking more to the community, because I want to have a solid theme to invite someone on, to make sure that we have real focus. Also, a little bit, it's very easy on something like YouTube for people to be reaching up and wanting to bring people on, just for clout to grow. So that's where I see having a specific purpose to bringing someone on. So that's why I put thought into, like, to me, you're the community guy. So I wanted to make sure, if that's what I'm talking about, this is why bringing someone on. So
I
kind of like
appreciate
a litmus test to the self in a way.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man.
All right, thank you. And I'll do it. See you guys.